side of him. I think he's still that same Steve. He's still that. But now you're also seeing another side of him that he never had to show.
Telling people you work with, I don't want you even to be next to me. Like, I have such disdain for you that I am annoyed by your presence.
Steve Harvey always looked untouchable. Tailored suits, polished smile, and that smooth, unstoppable confidence that made him a TV powerhouse. From Family Feud to the Steve Harvey Show, from Miss Universe stages to those viral motivational clips, he built the image of a man who had it all together, success, wisdom, and swagger. But lately, that image is cracking, and it's the comedy world, the same one that made him a legend, that's now turning on him. Comedians who once shared stages with Steve are pulling back the curtain, and what they're revealing could flip how fans see him forever. Behind the clean-cut charm and those uplifting speeches, some insiders are whispering that Steve's rise might not have been as spotless as it seemed. They claim his success came with some messy chapters, borrowed material, backstabbed friends, and business moves that left scars across the comedy scene. Let's rewind the clock for a second. Steve Harvey came up during the golden age of stand-up, late 80s and 90s, when the game was flooded with real talent. You had Bernie Mack with that raw fire, Cedric the Entertainer with that southern smooth, D.L. Hewley's razor-sharp wit, Monique's bold energy, and later, Katt Williams lighting up every stage he touched. These comedians earned respect the hard way, grinding through no-sleep nights, tiny checks, and dusty clubs just to get a laugh. But according to some of those same legends, Steve wasn't always playing by the same rules. Word around the circuit was that Steve didn't just borrow from others, he took. Comedian Mark Curry, yeah, the same guy from Hanging with Mr. Cooper, came out and said it straight. Steve didn't just get inspired by his material, he stole it. Mark claims Steve performed one of his most personal routines, a childhood Halloween story, word for word on national TV without ever giving credit.
No Halloween costume.
I think we UPS, I guess, I don't know.
You've heard me say that every Halloween I had the same outfit on. I just had a brown box, and he just told me to tell everybody I was a UPS man.
My material on his show, so I had a beef on that. On what show? When he was on his the bullshit talk show he had, and he did all my Halloween material one Halloween.
Says he knows that Steve Harvey stole his Halloween bit because it was a personal story. He was talking about himself growing up.
Fans were shocked because if that's true, it means one of the biggest names in comedy built part of his legend using someone else's voice. And that's the kind of accusation that can stain even the cleanest suit. In comedy, there's one rule that's sacred. You never steal another comic's material.
Comedians don't appreciate their jokes being stolen, and Steve Harvey has rubbed several comedians the wrong way. Well, it looks like Harvey has found himself in some trouble.
That's the golden code, the one thing everyone respects. Because when you steal a joke, you're not just taking words, you're taking someone's voice, their struggle, their soul on stage. And that's exactly why these accusations against Steve Harvey hit so hard. But here's the thing, it wasn't just Mark Curry saying it. Over the years, quiet whispers started echoing through green rooms and backstage corners. More and more comedians started hinting that Steve might have built pieces of his act from other people's work. And when the same story keeps coming from different mouths, the industry starts listening.
This cat is hot. Please put your hands together for Katt Williams.
Saying you are not supposed to be at the gas station making life decisions.
Can't even pump gas like you used to no more.
If you put $15 in your tank, you had time to bond with your vehicle. You had time to put the nozzle in and
put the nozzle in there and hit it.
And set the clicker and look through your car and clean off the dashboard. And
be sitting there talking, be on your phone. Hey, what's happening? Be walking around, cleaning the windshield.
Run in the store, get some Pringles and a Snapper, and it'll still be pumping.
Okay, you go in there, bring me a wine cooler. Bring me a cooler, dog. Not no more.
You can't even turn around good for that son of a bitch click. As soon as you put it in, just click, click.
Get in there and start it up, and you can't believe that damn needle is a quarter tank of gas.
Even Bernie Mack, the people's king of comedy himself, reportedly had his own run-ins with Steve. Word is, When Bernie finally landed his big Hollywood break with Ocean's 11, Steve tried to slide in and convince producers he'd be a better fit. Can you imagine that? Your friend, your fellow king of comedy, trying to snatch your shine behind your back? That's not ambition anymore, that's straight up betrayal.
Bernie said in the GQ article that when he got Ocean's 11, Steve had reached out to the producers and said he thought he would be a better fit and tried to get the part and blah, blah, blah. And that was that,
And then came Katt Williams, never one to hold his tongue. In one of his legendary interviews, Katt didn't just throw shade, he dropped a whole eclipse on Steve. He said point blank, Steve wasn't the king of comedy. He was the king of stealing jokes. He even roasted him, saying Hollywood had never made room for a country bumpkin who looked like Mr. Potato Head. Katt's message was sharp. He wasn't just joking, he was exposing what he saw as fake energy. Katt claimed Steve's whole Southern gentleman with humble roots image was just a script, a performance crafted for Hollywood cameras. And if that wasn't enough drama, Monique, one of the strongest and most fearless women in comedy, had her own public clash with Steve that sent fans reeling. When Monique spoke out about being blackballed in Hollywood for refusing to play the game, Steve didn't back her up. Instead, he went on national TV and told her she was wrong. He said she needed to play the money game, not the integrity game.
I heard you go on the air and you said, my sister done burnt too many bridges, and there's nothing I can do for her now. Steve, do you know how hurt I was?
That moment hit deep, because for many people, it felt like Steve had traded authenticity for access, loyalty for luxury, and brotherhood for business. The very man who preached about integrity seemed to forget it when the cameras rolled. You could see the pain written all over Monique's face that day. To her, Steve Harvey wasn't just another talk show host. He was supposed to be family, a brother in comedy, someone who stood for truth, loyalty, and unity. But right there, live on national TV, he showed the world that his loyalty wasn't to her. It was to power and reputation. That clip exploded online because it felt like a moment of truth, a split screen of Hollywood itself. On one side, Monique standing her ground, fighting for her principles. On the other, Steve defending the system that profits off silence and compliance. Fans saw it and started connecting the dots, realizing this wasn't just about one argument. It was a pattern. It wasn't even the first time Steve had been accused of putting his image above his peers. Even D.L. Hewley, one of his longtime friends and fellow kings of comedy, once made a comment that had people raising eyebrows. He said, Steve knows how to survive in every room. At first, that might sound like praise, but DL wasn't smiling when he said it. He meant that Steve knows how to adjust, how to become whatever version of himself the room requires. Humble and faith-driven when the cameras are rolling, but behind closed doors, all business, all control. A man who knows how to protect his seat at the table, no matter who gets left standing. That survival instinct is part of what made Steve a powerhouse. No question about it. But that same adaptability made a lot of comedians feel like his rise came at their expense. Some say it's not just strategy, it's calculated detachment. Comedian Mark Curry even told a story that left fans stunned. He said he once confronted Steve face-to-face at a show, straight up asked him why he used his material without permission.
You know, my thing with Steve Harvey is that he used my material on both his platforms.
Yeah.
After I talked to him, I saw him at Def Jam, I went up and talked to him, I said, man, you're using my material.
Mark said Steve brushed him off like it was no big deal, laughed it away, and walked off like nothing happened. But weeks later, that same bit, Mark's own childhood story, was performed by Steve on national television. Can you imagine that? Watching someone take your real-life story, turn it into a punchline, and cash out while you're sitting in the audience, unseen, unpaid, and unheard? That's not just disrespect. It's a knife in the back, especially in comedy where originality is your only currency. And yet, despite all the smoke, Steve's career only climbed higher. From grimy comedy clubs to gleaming primetime sets, it was like every controversy just bounced off him, like his charm and confidence formed a shield no one could break. But now that armor's starting to crack and people are finally asking how much of Steve's success was built on his own grind and how much was built on someone else's. Steve Harvey didn't just become famous, he became the face of success. The polished family man, the faith-driven preacher, the motivational speaker dropping viral quotes, the sharpest dresser in every room. He turned himself into a brand that screamed discipline, faith, and hustle. But behind all that shine, there's a growing whisper in the comedy world, one that cuts deep. Steve don't keep friends, he keeps opportunities. That line reportedly came from someone who worked on his old radio team, and fans never forgot it. Because it felt true, it explained why so many people who once stood beside him later vanished from his circle. The idea was simple. Once you're no longer useful to Steve, you're gone. And maybe that's exactly how he stayed on top for decades, by treating loyalty like business and friendship like a contract. Maybe Steve figured out what most people refuse to admit, that Hollywood doesn't reward kindness, it rewards strategy. It doesn't celebrate loyalty, it celebrates leverage. And when you live by that code, you win big. But you also leave a trail of bruised egos and broken trust behind. Those scars are starting to show now, loudly, because the names attached to the whispers aren't small. They're Katt Williams, Mark Curry, Bernie Mack, Monique, legends in their own right. Each one at some point hinted that Steve's climb to the top came at a serious cost. Even Steve himself once said something that hits differently now. In an old interview, he admitted, "I've done things I ain't proud of, but when you're hungry, you eat what's in front of you." At the time, most folks thought he was being poetic, speaking about hard work and perseverance. But looking back, that line sounds more like a confession, like maybe Steve was low-key acknowledging the compromises he made on his way up. Because this story isn't just about jokes and punchlines, it's about what people are willing to sacrifice for power, for visibility, for legacy. Steve Harvey's success is undeniable. No one can take that away. But now, as more voices from the past start speaking up, the question is growing louder and louder. Did Steve earn his throne? Or did he just play the game better than anyone else? In Hollywood, talent gets you noticed, but ruthlessness gets you remembered. And back in the late 90s, when the Kings of Comedy tour shook the world, Steve Harvey stood on stage shoulder to shoulder with icons. Bernie Mack, Cedric the Entertainer, and D.L. Hewley. They were brothers in laughter, 4 crowns under one spotlight. But even in that brotherhood, some people say Steve's ambition started to shine brighter than the bond that built it. And maybe, just maybe, that was the moment his empire began. Not in friendship, but in strategy. The Kings of Comedy tour was supposed to be pure unity. 4 giants standing tall for the culture, lighting up arenas with laughter and love. On stage, it looked like a family, a powerhouse brotherhood built on mutual respect. But off stage, it wasn't nearly as clean as it seemed. Bernie Mack, the powerhouse who stole every show with his raw street humor and fearless delivery, later admitted something that broke fans' hearts. He didn't fully trust Steve Harvey during that era. Behind the bright lights and shared laughter, there was quiet tension, and the whispers only got louder with time. Rumor has it that after Bernie locked in his role in Ocean's 11, Steve allegedly tried to slide in and make a play for the part, calling producers to convince them he'd be a better fit. That wasn't just business, it was betrayal. 2 brothers crowned as kings, yet one allegedly trying to steal the other's crown in the shadows. When Bernie passed away in 2008, that wound never healed. And when Steve made his public tributes, fans couldn't help but notice something off. His speeches felt more self-centered than sincere, as if he was reminding everyone that he was still here. He was the last king standing, the torchbearer of comedy. But fans weren't buying it. To this day, there's a clear line drawn between the 2 legacies. Bernie Mac is remembered as the people's king, the man who spoke truth raw and unfiltered. Steve Harvey, he's known as the TV king, polished, scripted, and safe for daytime television. Bernie earned love through authenticity, while Steve earned fame through image. Clean suits, sharp smiles, and well-rehearsed speeches made for the mainstream. And then came Katt Williams, the one comedian who never sugarcoats anything. Katt has gone on record several times tearing into Steve, accusing him not just of joke theft, but show theft. He claimed the Steve Harvey Show was basically a rebranded version of Hanging with Mr. Cooper, the sitcom that starred Mark Curry years before. And honestly, when you line them up side by side, the similarities are wild. Both shows centered around a sharply dressed, middle-aged comedian working in a school, mentoring kids, teaching life lessons, and flexing charm every episode. It's like Hollywood just swapped the faces and changed the wardrobe. Katt didn't mince words. He said Steve took someone else's blueprint and polished it up for prime time. He called it corporate comedy, saying Steve learned how to take someone else's raw creativity, clean it up, and make it sellable. And that hit hard because it echoed what so many other comedians had been saying for years, that Steve Harvey didn't just win by being funny, he won by being strategic. On that Kings of Comedy stage, fans saw laughter, love, and legacy. But behind the scenes, there was tension, competition, and betrayal simmering just beneath the surface. And now, years later, the stories spilling out make it clear. What looked like unity on tour might have really been a quiet battle for the crown. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you start lining up all the details, Katt Williams' theory doesn't sound far-fetched at all. Once you stack that next to Mark Curry's accusations, that Steve used to pull up to his comedy gigs, sit in the crowd, watch his whole set, and then go out later performing those same jokes, it starts feeling like a pattern, not a mix-up. Mark even said he confronted Steve face to face, told him straight up, "You're using my material." But according to Mark, Steve just shrugged it off and kept it moving, like it didn't even matter. That one moment spoke volumes, because when you got power in Hollywood, people start thinking you can do anything and no one will call you out. And that's exactly what seemed to happen once Steve Harvey became a household name. He wasn't just a comedian anymore, he was a brand, the man America loved to laugh with. The clean-cut, faith-driven father figure who told motivational stories about God, marriage, loyalty, and grinding your way to success. So when these accusations started bubbling up, people didn't want to believe them. It didn't fit the image, the perfect suits, the smooth talk, the family values. The public saw Steve as the man who could make you laugh and make you cry with a speech, not the guy comedians were accusing of stealing jokes and betraying friends. But that's where the real twist comes in. Because Hollywood has always been a game of illusion. Behind the cameras and applause, it's not about truth, it's about power and perception. The better you control your image, the more untouchable you become. And Steve, he mastered that art better than almost anyone. The industry protects its favorites, even when the whispers get too loud to ignore. That's the dark side nobody wants to talk about. Hollywood will chew up dreamers, spit out the forgotten ones, but shield the chosen few if they're profitable enough. Steve wasn't just successful, he was marketable. And when someone becomes a symbol of inspiration, people will bend over backward to defend them even when the truth is staring them in the face. Even D.L. Hewley, who's known Steve for decades, started letting small truths slip through the cracks. On one podcast, he said something simple but powerful. Steve knows how to survive in any room. At first, it sounds harmless, like a compliment. But when you really break it down, that line hits different. What DL was really saying is that Steve has mastered code switching, the ability to become whoever the situation needs him to be, whether it's playing humble and faithful for the public or calculating and controlled when the cameras are off. Steve knows how to read the room, say the right thing, and keep the doors open. That's not just talent, that's strategy. And maybe that's the secret to how he stayed winning while everyone else around him kept fading. Because in Hollywood, survival isn't about honesty, it's about adaptation. And Steve Harvey, he turned that survival instinct into an empire. That kind of adaptability makes you unstoppable in Hollywood, but it also makes people start to question your integrity. Because at some point, the masks blur together and everyone starts asking the same thing. Who is the real Steve Harvey? And if there's one moment that truly cracked that image, it was his clash with Monique. When she stood up after Precious, calling out Hollywood for blackballing her and treating her unfairly, Steve didn't stand beside her like a brother in comedy. Instead, he went on national television and told her she was wrong for speaking out. He didn't sugarcoat it either. He said it plain and cold. This ain't the integrity game. This the money game, and you could see the heartbreak in Monique's eyes. She said she loved Steve like family, but she couldn't understand how a man who preaches about loyalty, faith, and truth could side with the same system that broke her down. That interview exploded online because it stripped away the Mr. Positive mask and revealed something raw, the businessman underneath. The version of Steve that prioritizes checks over causes, connections over conscience. And when fans replayed that clip over and over, they started catching the subtext. Steve wasn't trying to save Monique or even disagree respectfully. He was protecting his own seat at the table. That's the real Hollywood power play, protecting access, not allies. It was a moment that reminded everyone that loyalty in this business usually ends where opportunity begins. But here's the wildest part. No matter how many scandals, accusations, or call-outs hit him, Steve Harvey never falls off. His career doesn't crumble, it grows. Every time people think he's done, he comes back with something bigger. New shows, more brand deals, global gigs. The man is like Hollywood Teflon, nothing sticks. Remember that Miss Universe fiasco? When he announced the wrong winner live on stage in front of millions? That kind of mistake could have ended anyone else's career on the spot. But Steve, he flipped it like a pro. Turned the blunder into a punchline, laughed through the memes, and came back the next year to host the same show again like nothing ever happened. And that's when people started realizing maybe Steve Harvey doesn't survive controversy. Maybe he profits from it. It's like he's mastered what everyone else fears, using controversy as currency. Every misstep becomes a marketing moment. Every backlash turns into buzz. Every scandal feeds his spotlight. Even when his comments about women, relationships, and marriage stirred backlash, he spun it into more content, more books, more viral clips. When most stars would disappear for damage control, Steve doubled down, smiled through it, and turned every headline into another opportunity. It's almost like he cracked the code the rest of Hollywood's still trying to solve. How to turn bad press into free promotion. How to stay bulletproof in an industry built on drama. Because at this point, no matter what storm hits him, Steve Harvey doesn't sink. He sails right through it, suit pressed, smile sharp, ready for the next check. He might just be the only man in Hollywood who turned scandal into strategy and made it look effortless. That kind of control doesn't come from luck, it comes from power. Real, calculated, hard-earned power. Steve Harvey's been in this game long enough to master survival at every level, and he knows exactly how to protect his image no matter what storm comes his way. But that kind of skill cuts both ways, because when you get too used to surviving, you stop caring who gets crushed in the process. And now, the people he left behind, they're starting to talk. Comedians, former co-workers, even staff from his old radio days are stepping forward with stories that paint a very different picture of the man America thinks they know. They say behind the cameras, Steve wasn't the fun, loving mentor with the big laugh. He was cold, controlling, and strict. A perfectionist who treated his empire like a corporation, not a community. People who worked for him say that once the cameras stopped rolling, the energy shifted fast. That the warm TV personality disappeared, replaced by a boss who ran everything with iron discipline. They said you had to watch every word, because one slip, one wrong comment, and you were gone, replaced without warning. To them, Steve wasn't a mentor, he was a machine, a man obsessed with control, perfection, and performance. And that's where the contrast hits hardest, because there seem to be two versions of Steve Harvey. The one the public sees, smiling, preaching, inspiring millions, and the one insiders whisper about, ruthless, distant, and always 3 steps ahead. That's what makes this whole story so fascinating. How can a man build an empire on charm and laughter, yet leave behind a trail of people feeling used, ignored, or betrayed? How can someone preach about faith and family on TV while quietly running his world like a power broker behind the scenes? Steve once said, "You gotta be willing to do whatever it takes." Maybe that wasn't just advice. Maybe it was his personal blueprint. Because when you start connecting the dots, it becomes clear. Steve Harvey's story isn't just about triumph. It's about survival. Every move he's made, from stand-up comic to sitcom star, from radio host to game show king, from preacher of faith to global businessman, was part of one long climb. A climb where nothing was off limits. Not friendships, not loyalty, not even reputation, as long as it kept him moving up. And that's where it all comes full circle. Because for every laugh, every viral clip, every polished success story attached to Steve Harvey's name, there's a line of people quietly saying they paid the price for his rise. The producers who walked away, the comics who stopped trusting him, the colleagues who said he changed once the fame came. He once admitted, "When you're hungry, you eat what's in front of you." Maybe that wasn't just a metaphor, it was a confession. Maybe it meant that in Steve's world, nothing was ever too sacred. No bond too strong if it stood between him and success. And now, as the old stories resurface and new ones begin to spread, the truth behind the clean suits and bright smile might finally be showing. Because if Hollywood has taught us anything, it's that every legend has a cost, and some bills always come due. Every version of Steve Harvey comes with a new layer of polish and a new list of people who swear they were left behind. But this time, Those voices aren't fading into the background. They're getting louder, sharper, and harder to ignore. Mark Curry's old interviews are back in circulation, and fans are dissecting every word. Katt Williams keeps lighting him up, calling out the things other comedians are too scared to say. Monique still stands tall on her principles, reminding everyone of that painful TV moment when Steve looked her in the eye and told her to play the money game. And hovering over it all is the memory of Bernie Mack, the people's king. His name still echoes whenever this conversation comes up, because Bernie didn't need Hollywood's approval to earn love. He earned it through truth, loyalty, and authenticity. When fans watch old clips of Bernie talking about unity, brotherhood, and his love for the craft, then see Steve branding himself as the last king standing, it just hits different. People can feel what's real, and they can smell when something's rehearsed. And that's what makes this story sting so deep. It's not really about who told what joke first, it's about who stayed true when the fame hit. Because once the lights get bright, the pressure either humbles you or hardens you. And with Steve Harvey, his whole brand has always been built around image. The man who talks about faith, family, and hard work on stage, but off camera, insiders describe someone totally different. Someone who cuts off anyone who challenges him, someone who treats loyalty like a transaction. Former radio co-workers even said working for Steve was like walking on eggshells. One slip up, one wrong tone, and you were out. No warning, no conversation, just gone. That kind of fear doesn't come from one bad day. It comes from years of control, precision, and strategy. Yet somehow, through every wave of backlash, Steve just keeps winning. He's like the ultimate Hollywood survivor. No scandal too big, no accusation too wild. From the Miss Universe blunder that made global headlines to his controversial takes on women and relationships, nothing sticks. Every time the public thinks he's finished, he flips the script, cracks a smile, and walks right back into the spotlight like he never left. Suits crisp, smile wide, words perfectly timed. That's not luck. That's power. Real, refined, behind-the-scenes power. The kind that doesn't just protect you, it prepares you. Because Steve doesn't react to storms. He moves before they even hit. He's been in this business long enough to read energy like a script, to know when to pivot, when to charm, and when to disappear just long enough to make the world miss him again. But even with all that strategy, there's one thing no one escapes forever: karma. And karma doesn't care how famous you are or how tailored your suit looks on camera. It always finds its way back, especially in Hollywood, where every secret eventually comes to light. Because here's the real twist. Steve Harvey built his empire on storytelling. But now, the story everyone's telling is about him. And for the first time, he's not the narrator. He's the subject. So as these old clips resurface, as the voices from the past grow louder, one question keeps hanging in the air. Did Steve Harvey really master the game, or did the game finally start playing him back? Now the people who lived those stories are finally telling theirs, and every time one of them speaks, another layer of Steve Harvey's shiny image starts to crack. This isn't hate, it's history catching up, because when you've got comedy legends like Bernie Mack, truth tellers like Katt Williams, and strong voices like Monique all pointing to the same man with the same kind of story, it stops sounding like gossip and starts sounding like truth. These aren't random haters, they're people who were there. They saw how the game was played, they felt the energy shift, and now they're saying what others won't. You can only call it coincidence so many times before it starts looking like a pattern that's been there all along. Even D.L. Hewley, one of Steve's oldest friends and someone who's defended him more than once, eventually dropped a line that hit fans like a gut punch. You can't please everybody, but you can be real with yourself. That was subtle, but powerful, because that's the one thing people say Steve's been struggling with all along, being real with himself. It's easy to please Hollywood when you play by its rules. Smile for the cameras, talk about faith, stay polished, stay marketable. But the streets, they remember who you were before the lights came on. They remember the grind, the jokes, the hunger, the come up, and they remember when it stopped feeling genuine. That's where the tension lives, between the man Steve wants the world to see and the man the comedy world remembers. One is the inspirational mogul on TV, the preacher of discipline and faith. The other is the hustler who learned early that survival in Hollywood means knowing when to switch up. Still, no one can deny the grind. Steve Harvey works harder than almost anyone in the business. Facts. He built an empire from the ground up, powered by charisma, hustle, and relentless ambition. But even the strongest empire can crumble if the foundation underneath starts to crack. And that's the question fans are asking now. Was Steve's foundation ever as solid as it looked? For years, he's been the face of motivation, the man who told millions to pray, hustle, and stay humble. But what if the story he's been preaching isn't the story he's been living? What if behind every laugh there's a lie? What if behind every motivational quote there's a compromise nobody talks about? Because at some point it stops being about success. It becomes about control. What you will protect, what you will trade, and what you'll sacrifice just to stay on top. And as more comedians, co-workers, and insiders speak out, it's starting to sound like Steve's story isn't just about making it, it's about maintaining power at any cost. And when fame turns into survival, it's easy to lose the very soul that got you there in the first place. The laughter fades, the spotlight burns hotter, and suddenly you're surrounded by applause, but no real friends left to clap for you. Maybe that's the hidden truth behind Steve Harvey's empire. Maybe being the king of comedy doesn't come from how loud the crowd cheers, but from how much of yourself you're willing to lose just to keep the crown shining. In a business where loyalty means less than ratings, fame can love you for a moment, but truth always finds a way to shine brighter. And now, that light is starting to hit places Steve Harvey never wanted it to reach. So here's the question everyone's asking. Did Steve truly earn his crown? Or did he borrow it from the very people he stepped over on the way up? Because whether it's Mark Curry, Katt Williams, Monique, or even the shadow of Bernie Mack's legacy, the whispers aren't whispers anymore. They're a chorus. The laughter that once built Steve's empire is starting to fade, replaced by voices that sound a lot like truth. Comedians who were there in the trenches are finally speaking up, and every news story chips another piece off that perfect image. The curtain's lifting, and what's behind it isn't the motivational preacher or family man America thought they knew. It's something colder, something calculated. But make no mistake, this isn't the end of Steve Harvey's story. This is the beginning of his reckoning. Because no matter how many blessings, books, or brand deals you stack, fame doesn't erase the past, it just hides it under the lights. And when those lights start to dim, the truth always steps into the frame. The question isn't if karma's coming for Steve, it's when. Because you can dodge critics, you can dodge headlines, you can even buy silence. But you can't dodge your reflection when the cameras stop rolling. That's when every move, every betrayal, every money game quote starts echoing back louder than ever. And maybe that's the real twist here. The same spotlight that made Steve Harvey a household name might be the very thing that finally exposes everything he's tried to bury. The fame that once crowned him might now be the flame that burns the myth down. So now it's your turn. What do you think? Did Steve climb that ladder fair and square, or were there shortcuts paved with broken trust and borrowed jokes? Did he hustle his way to greatness, or hustle through the people who helped him rise? Drop your thoughts below, because this conversation isn't ending, it's evolving. Hollywood might have built Steve's image, but it's the voices from the comedy trenches, the ones who saw it all firsthand, that are finally ready to tear it down. This story's not over. It's only getting louder. So stay tuned, because the next chapter might just shake the entire comedy world to its core. And one thing's for sure, the same crowd that once laughed with Steve Harvey might be the same crowd ready to laugh at the truth. Like, share, comment, and subscribe, because this saga isn't finished yet. The truth is just getting started. So here we are. The story that started with laughter ends in revelation. Steve Harvey's empire, built on charm, hustle, and hard work, now stands at a crossroads. Because behind every punchline, every slick suit, and every viral speech about faith and perseverance, there's a history the cameras never showed. Maybe Steve isn't just the king of comedy. Maybe he's the king of reinvention, the man who learned how to turn every scandal into a strategy, every controversy into currency. But the question that lingers, the one no brand deal can silence, is this: how much truth do you trade to stay untouchable? From Bernie Mack's unfiltered loyalty, to Monique's courage, to Katt Williams and Mark Curry's confessions, each voice adds another crack in the mirror Steve built. And now, as fans replay those clips and connect the dots, it's clear this isn't just a story about comedy. It's about control, reputation, and survival in the spotlight. Because in Hollywood, fame can make you rich, but it can also make you forget who you were before the fame. Steve Harvey's story reminds us that behind every king's crown lies a cost, and sometimes that cost is everything you once stood for. But the clock's still ticking, and the whispers are growing into thunder. Will Steve face the truth head on, or rewrite the script again before the credits roll? One thing's for sure, the final act hasn't played out yet, and when it does, the whole comedy world will be watching. This is BarzBuzz, where we dig deeper than the headlines and peel back the layers of Hollywood's most powerful stories. Hit that subscribe, drop a comment, and tell us, is Steve Harvey a survivor or the architect of his own downfall? Because this saga isn't over, it's just getting started.